Hello, my name's Jason Kennedy and this is the Børresen X3 floor standing loudspeaker. Made in Denmark by Børresen, which is part of the AGD or Audio Group Denmark group. That's a bit of a mouthful. It's the least expensive floor stander that the company makes, and in the UK it comes in at £11,000. In Europe it's 10,000 euros, which seems like a particularly good price really, given the scale and quality of finish that you get with this speaker. It's distinguished by these spread toe carbon fibre drivers, which is a relatively new technology that only a few companies are using at the moment. The only other one I've tested is Børresen, who use them in their similarly priced, actually more expensive speakers. The X3 is one of two X series models introduced by Børresen this year. It's the least expensive of the two as well. The X6 is about twice the price and inevitably a bit bigger than this. It uses carbon fibre reinforcement at the bottom of the baffle and on the top, and the cabinet itself is unusually tapered. It's a lot wider at the baffle. It's 22 centimeters wide, whereas the spine, the back of the speaker, is only 6 centimeters wide, which is it's just over 2 inches in old money. The checkerboard spread toe weave on these drivers allows the use of finer carbon fibres than more conventional drivers, which means you end up with a lighter cone that's therefore easier to control. It's not the only. There's more to the cone than that surface. Behind that there's an aramid foam core and then another skin of carbon fibre on the back, so it's a sandwich construction which gives you stiffness, and the thinness of the carbon fibre and the lightness of the foam means it's a very light cone as well, which is usually a good thing. The top driver is a mid-range, whereas the lower two are bass drivers. They're all the same size, they're 4.5 inch drivers, and they have twin copper caps on the magnetic pole. The twin copper caps are used to provide a smoother inductance for the amplifier to deal with. Essentially, it makes the amplifier's life easier, and anything that does that is a good thing, and it should result in a smoother acoustic response as well. The ribbon tweeter is 70 millimeters high and 28 millimeters wide. It's based on the one you see in Børresen's most expensive M series loudspeakers, the top model of which is €500,000. It's not exactly the same, but it's fundamentally the same. It's just a sort of more affordable version that is incredibly lightweight and yet has significant power handling. It can play back at high levels. This is aided to an extent by the fact that it's got this wave guide, which gives it a little bit of extra efficiency, makes it easier to drive the air in the room. The tweeter operates from 2.5 kilohertz all the way up to 50 kilohertz, so it's a massive bandwidth, which means that the cone drivers can concentrate on the crucial mid-range and bass area. On the back of the cabinet there are no fewer than 7 reflex ports, which seems excessive by any standards. However, the slimness of the rear spine means you can't put a large port on the back of it, so they've used multiple ports to load the separate bass, mid-range and treble enclosures. The smallest port on the back is for the solely for the treble enclosure, which is a relatively shallow enclosure in the box. The cabinet is wedge shaped with curves on either flank, and that means there are no parallel sides on the internally, which reduces reflections internally. It also, the curve gives it extra stiffness, and of course there is bracing within the cabinet which further stiffen the box. It's a pretty solid cabinet that comes in at 55 kilos all in, which is quite a lot for a speaker at this price point. The base is notably wider, although not significantly wider than the rest of the speaker, which gives it some stability, and it has 4 Ansus feet on it. The base is made of a sandwich of aluminium and composite wood. The cabinet itself is also composite wood, but the base has these Ansus feet which can be placed on any sort of floor surface as they are, but can also be used with the Ansus Darks resonance control feet. This raises it up, adds a degree of isolation and a degree of tuning, and this is quite a useful way of being able to upgrade the sound of the speaker, albeit quite an expensive way. One of these is €640, so a set isn't inexpensive.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show.
I found that placement wise I had to put it further from the back wall than is usually the case with speakers of this size. This is a fairly bass-light room, and a bit of wall reinforcement is often a good thing, but possibly because there are so many reflex ports or because of the way they're tuned, I had to leave a pretty decent gap between the wall and the back of the speakers in the Audio Group Denmark's DEM rooms, which I visited last year. I noted there was always at least a metre or two behind their speakers, which suggests that they do need a bit of room to breathe. The sound that I got was quite remarkable, very impressive indeed. In fact, I don't have the same type of amplifier that their sister company, Arvik, make, but I used a More Amps Angel 6, which is a 150 watt Class AB amplifier, as opposed to a Class D, which is the case with the Arvik designs, and I got really excellent results. Perhaps the most surprising of which, given the slimness of the cabinet, was how powerful and well extended the bass is. It's I do have trouble. The room, as I mentioned, is bass light, and I had trouble getting serious bass out of many loudspeakers here, but that was definitely not the case with these, hence the need to pull them into the room. And I had a thoroughly good time listening to, all manner of music, but especially music that had some, bottom end on it. They're extremely revealing speakers too. The X3 is, on the one hand, has a very low inherent noise floor. There's very little noise comes from the cabinets or the drivers that isn't part of the musical signal. There's very little overhang, there's no apparent ringing, the box doesn't seem to join in with the sound, and likewise those ports, even though there's so many of them, you can't hear any sense that they're there so long as you've got enough space behind the speaker. What you get is very high levels of detail, very high resolution, and impressive sound quality for the money. I really enjoyed an album called The World in Air Quotes by The God in Hackney, which is a contemporary, slightly prog album, but really nicely produced, and it has a very sort of sculpted sound. There's a sort of very definite placement of sounds within the sound stage, and this speaker really gets out of the way and lets the sort of sound take over the room. You can literally close your eyes and have difficulty pinpointing where the speakers themselves are, because it produces an image either side, both in the centre and outside of each loudspeaker, which was particularly impressive and enjoyable, to be honest. The Børresen X3s do like to play loud. They seem to sound a lot better when you wind them up a bit, which is not uncommon. It's something you find with quite a lot of loudspeakers, perhaps more so with those with smaller drive units. But it does mean that if you have neighbours or squeamish cats, this is something to consider. But generally, because the coloration is so low, the distortion, it's a really nice sound at higher levels. You don't feel any discomfort or fatigue from playing them for a while. I'm not talking about crazy levels, I'm talking about 90 dB, 80 dB. They just work better at that sort of, you get a stronger sense of dynamics when you're playing them at a serious level. They are also very good at reproducing realism. I played a Keith Jarrett live album, the Live at Carnegie Hall one, which is just solo piano, but extremely well recorded. And you get a really strong sense of the atmosphere and the scale of the venue and the nature of the instrument and the brilliance of the playing, of course. That's what comes to the fore. You have to put up with a bit of muttering from Jarrett, of course, but you know, everyone has their peccadillos, and he makes up for it with some phenomenal playing on that album. They also work with more complex pieces. Patricia Barber's Postmodern Blues is a bit more complicated. It's piano, double bass, drums, and some people use the term inky blackness to describe the quietness of backgrounds on equipment like this, where usually electronics are given that accolade, but it's equally true of loudspeakers. Loudspeakers need to be fundamentally quiet, not to join in with the music, not to vibrate, resonate, or in any way colour the sound, and these ones are extremely good at that. This is why you can hear so much on this speaker, because the noise floor itself is much lower than many other speakers. Even at this price point, you get speakers do have a tendency to join in. It's very difficult to control cabinets, especially wooden cabinets, are prone to vibrating along with the music. And while that can sound pretty good, it doesn't necessarily get in the way. You'll always hear more music if it's not happening. You'll always hear more of the signal if there's no coloration, or low coloration at least, coming from the loudspeaker. And this speaker does that particularly well, especially for the money. It's while it's not an inexpensive loudspeaker, it is, in the context of high-end loudspeakers, quite sensibly priced, especially given the size. It's about 1.3 meters high, which is 4 foot something, 4'3" perhaps. You get a lot of speaker for your money. I did try using the Darks S2T feet on it, 8 of them, and that enhanced the precision, the speed, and dropped the noise floor a little bit too, so you could hear a little more fine detail. Most speakers you can't just upgrade that easily. Usually you have to buy a new loudspeaker or new accessories like cables or components. Here you've got a clear upgrade path, which is pretty audible and worthwhile if you can afford it. But standing on their own feet, they are superb loudspeakers. The Børresen X3 represents impressive value for money, considering that it's made in Denmark, where nearly everything seems to cost too much, especially once it's got to the UK or the US. So I have to say I recommend them, and hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks very much.